What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. Now, if it looks like I'm just glowing and beaming with excitement and happiness, it's because it's unbelievably warm out today. I am just so excited. As you can see, I'm not even wearing a coat. In fact, I could probably be in a t-shirt today. It just topped out at 61 degrees today. So I know it's not necessarily going to last. And I know that this is going to be a very temporary gift given to us, but I'm going to take advantage of it, and I'm going to bring you guys out here. I've got some stuff to do in the garden today, and I wanted to bring you guys along for a project that I've been meaning to do for quite a while. And I do also have to apologize that I didn't bring you guys along for all of it. So what I'm getting at is, back here on the side of our garage, we actually had a whole bunch of beautiful raspberry bushes. The problem is that not all the raspberry varieties did as well as others. And so what I really wanted to do was just start fresh. We had planted 6 different varieties of raspberries here. And the different varieties of raspberries, are not all going to be the same. Some grow a little taller, some are a little lower to the ground. Some are fall bearing, some are some are like June bearing or like summer bearing. And some produce a lot of runners, others produced very little. And so what I really wanted to do is I wanted to take all the attributes of the varieties that I grew and pick out my favorite, maybe 2 varieties. And that's something that I really encourage a lot of you to do. If you're someone that is, if you're someone that's trying to strive for production, if you're trying to strive for consistency year in and year out, one of the things that I like to do is I like to dedicate a spot on my garden. In this case, it's just, my whole spot that I was dedicating to raspberries. I dedicated to different varieties. And I knew that going into it that I was not going to keep all those varieties. I think this is something that is very valuable for you as a gardener to know, is that you can change things up even though they're perennials. You see, we dug out the plants, we dug them out, and we've since just gave them to a friend that was actually putting in some raspberry plants, and they didn't really care what varieties they got. And so we dug out the plants, put them in some 5-gallon pots, sent them over to their house so that we could really clear this spot here to really, I guess, gear us up for production. Because one of the things that we noticed is that we absolutely loved the gold fall bearing varieties. However, because of the location, the varieties grew very fast during the summer. But when the sun shifted, we actually got a little bit too much shade for the fall bearing gold varieties. In the fall, the sun was just lower in the sky, and so we got less sun, and the fall gold bearing varieties need a little bit more sun to do well. And so while they grew great, they just didn't produce great. And so just not a great variety for this area. So lesson learned. The next variety that we really enjoyed that we just didn't end up wanting to keep was called Heritage. Now, I love Heritage. It's a wonderful variety. It's incredibly beautiful, deep purple. It's just, it produced a lot of side shoots or a lot of runners. And that became a little bit of a nuisance in this area because this is our main walkway. This is our main thoroughfare to get to our backyard. And so the problem is that, we'd have to mow over them, and then you'd have these little sticks popping up, and you couldn't walk barefoot because you'd step on them. Again, nothing wrong with it. They produced great. I just didn't really like them for this area. So up they went. What we really settled on was Latham. I absolutely fell in love with Latham. They produce in the summer and the fall. They did really well with the amount of sunlight that this area got, and they didn't produce a whole lot of side runners. I mean, they did produce some. All raspberries will produce some, but they didn't produce as much as like the Heritage, and they did really wonderful there. And I said, you know what? I would much rather dedicate this whole spot to just one variety of raspberry. And then we're also going to mix in a variety of blackberry. We're going to put in a Navajo blackberry here. And we actually grew the Navajo blackberry up at my parents' cottage garden, the old cottage garden that we established 4 or 5 years ago. They have since actually sold that property, and so unfortunately we won't be able to go back up there because it's under new ownership, but they just kind of downsized. It was the time in their life to do that, and so we were renting the land from my parents, and we've since just obviously given that up, which is unfortunate. But we learned from that from the cottage garden that there's a variety of blackberry we just absolutely fell in love with, and that was called Navajo. And so we're going to be putting Navajo in the back here, and we're going to be putting Latham raspberry in the front. Just 2 varieties of berries. That's all we really want here, because we want to focus more on just quantity now. We're going to put about 3 or 4 of the raspberry plants and about 2 or 3 of the blackberry plants. and that's going to give us a nice full berry bed right here. They can go crazy and we can trellis them up. We can actually kind of trellis them a little bit up higher rather than letting them kind of go all over the place and sprawl. And so it's going to be a really good thing for our, I guess, for our overall vision for this property and what we want to get out of it. Now, the next thing that I wanted to bring you guys along for was preparing the bed. So we don't have any berry plants in the bed. As you can see, they're all dug up. So I got to get the soil prepped, and I thought you guys should just kind of come along for this to just kind of see what I do, because I do think that it's a very common misconception that people think that when you're preparing a bed that you have to do a bunch of work to get it back to its original state. And that's just not the case. You see, once you have the texture that's nice, you don't really have to do a whole lot of work. So one of the characteristics that I wanted to point out quickly before we amended the soil, that soil needs to be re-amended, is you can see a lot of these cracks here. These surface cracks are a sign that the soil does not have a whole lot of, organic matter. It's very dusty and it is very loose. It's absolutely beautiful. It's perfect for growing things like raspberries. But the problem is you can see here all these cracks, and these cracks are just caused from expansion and contraction of the soil when it's freezing and thawing. But in soil that's properly amended, it really shouldn't have these cracks at all. It should kind of just expand and contract without causing all those cracks and crevices to form. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just this is what you look for in soil that just needs a little bit of love. All right, so I'm just going to take some of this trifecta here and just sprinkle it onto the surface here. I'm going to sprinkle it pretty liberally, a lot more than you really need, but that's because this soil here is quite depleted. If I kept up with this and I kept maintaining it on a regular basis, I wouldn't have to use this much. I would just use a little bit. But because I really want to just give it a kickstart, I'm going to use a fair amount of it. And what's nice about trifecta is that it's got so much in it. It's got chicken manure, so it's got lots of nitrogen. It's got pelletized sulfur, so it's going to raise the pH. It's going to make the soil just slightly acidic. It also has lime and gypsum for good sources of calcium. It's got iron, so it's going to amend any micronutrient deficiencies. It's got over 50 different trace minerals, so you've got a lot of micronutrients there that are going to help the soil bacteria and fungi. And it's also got, what I really enjoy is it has beneficial bacteria and fungi added. So if you're amending a soil that is maybe slightly depleted, or in this case, very depleted, many soils that are depleted are also depleted of the beneficial fungi, the beneficial organisms that are in the soil. So because we pre-inoculate trifecta, we're actually kind of re-inoculating and re-incorporating some good bacteria and fungi into the soil again. And so that's kind of gonna give a kickstart to the population. All right, so we added the fertilizer, which is wonderful, but now we need to add some organic matter. It's a very common mistake that I see people making where they say they amended their soil, but they don't amend the organic matter. You see, you can amend all you want with nutrients, but if the soil quality is lacking, you're going to lose those nutrients you just added very quickly. This is one of the biggest problems I have with conventional farming, is that they kind of fix these nutrient issues year in and year out with additional fertilizer, but they don't take care of the soil. And if you don't take care of the soil, what happens? Well, during high winds, it blows away topsoil, it blows away nutrients. During heavy rains, it just washes the nutrients away. There's nothing actually holding it there because there's no good soil structure. And so as a steward of the land and as a gardener that wants to, not work harder, but instead actually just enjoy the fruits of my labor and enjoy watching my garden grow, I want to make sure that I get the foundation of healthy soil built right away, so that way I don't have to worry about it later on, and I'm not working harder than I have to. So I need to add some organic matter to my soil so that it can actually hold the soil in place. As you saw, my soil is kind of sandy and silty and kind of dusty, and that's great, for plant roots. It's great for the water to drain through. But the problem is, it drains too fast. It can dry out too fast. The soil is very light, it blows away, and under heavy rains, it does wash away. And so I need to get something like some good bagged compost Or, you know, if my compost pile wasn't frozen, I would use some compost from my compost pile. But because I have to get this bed prepped and ready to go, I'm just going to use some bagged compost for today. And that's fine. Once my compost pile thaws out, I'll sift some fresh compost and I'll put some on top as kind of a supplemental top dressing of compost. But like I said, I need to get my bed prepped and ready to go so that I can plant my bare root raspberry and blackberry plants. All right, so the last thing we need to do is we need to take a rake and just work in the compost and the fertilizer into the native soil. This is a big mistake I see gardeners not doing, is they just kind of add every layer, they leave it and they plant in it. And that's a problem because if you do that, what's gonna happen is the more native soil, it's gonna act as what's called a hard pan. And hard pan is just this hard compacted layer of soil. And what happens is when it rains, that soil is hard and compacted. It doesn't just absorb water readily right away. And so because it's not worked in, it's not incorporated with that better quality soil and fertilizer, it's just going to actually repel the water. And what happens is the water sits right there and it just flows and washes away all of your good quality compost and fertilizer you just added. So it's very counterproductive to what you were just trying to do, which was to amend the soil. And so the very simple fix to this is just by working it in. And I don't mean working it in by taking a shovel and double digging it and working it and rototilling it. You don't have to do that. That can be very counterproductive as well. All we need to do is just take, you know, the tines of a rake, take the teeth of a rake, and just basically just ever so slightly break up that top layer of hard pan. Also, what we're doing is we're creating a homogeneous mixture. We're creating one mixture of soil rather than just having stacks or layers of soil where one layer is better quality than the other. When we plant our plant in the soil, we don't want the roots to say, well, I'm just gonna stay here in this top layer where the soil quality is good and there's lots of nutrients. What we wanna do is we wanna encourage the root system to move throughout the soil. That's gonna create an established plant, which is going to end up overwintering better. It's gonna survive droughts better, heat, it's gonna produce better. And so it's overall just gonna be a healthier plant in the long run. And so that's the two reasons why we need to incorporate and break up the soil and just kind of mix all those three layers together. All right, and one final thing to note is if your soil is rock hard clay, I'm talking just pure clay. A lot of people ask me, Luke, should I do what you're doing if my soil is really hard clay? And the answer is no. This works because I've already worked my soil. I've already amended my soil. This has been worked for 4 or 5 years now, and so my soil quality was already very good. I think sometimes we think that gardening is just this black and white slate where it's either black or it's white, and you're either on one side or you're on the other. And it's so much of a spectrum where if you have really hard clay, you can take what I'm talking about and you can add in a tiller or a broad fork or a shovel and work the soil temporarily to get the soil quality where you want it, and then over time work towards a no-dig, no-till style gardening method, like what we're doing here. But if your soil is really hard clay, don't take what I'm saying and just follow it blindly, because you're going to end up really frustrated with the results. Because when I'm talking about hard pan, I'm talking about like a 1-inch layer. In your case, your hard pan might be 4 or 5 inches of just pure clay. You got to break that up. You got to work that in. And sometimes it takes tilling for 1 to 2 years to get the soil quality where you need it, so that you actually can have a garden for the first couple years, rather than just like I said, waste time and money and resources trying to do something that is not going to work. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. If you did enjoy, make sure to throw a like up there, and also make sure to tune in for next video. We're gonna be in the grow room starting tomato seeds. So I am so excited. I just love being out here. I love it. It's so nice. I'm gonna be out here for the whole day. Until the sun sets, I'll be out in the garden. So until next episode, I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you learned something new, and we'll catch you all on the next episode. Grow big or go home, everyone. Bye.